Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've been in front of the camera, but for good reason. I've had cool gear to show you, cool projects, Steph and Angela dancing. But today the topic I thought I'd cover is tweaks, and it was more conducive to me maybe doing some show and tell. So let's get started on that topic. In terms of tweaks, it's a very controversial area of audiophilia because there is quite a bit of snake oil. And the reason I can say that with authority is that I've tried, well, I'm not one of these guys that just poo-poo it from a distance. I've actually, for 30 plus years, I was much more gullible in my early years, and I would try things, the craziest of things. I even had one of the first aftermarket power cords. I'll grab it over here. This one was one that had a tunable device that would tune the resonance of the wire, believe it or not, and then also a screw here that you could tighten to tune the resonance of this IEC connector. I actually still keep it though because it's still a tweak for me. That's a positive in one respect because it's got the elevated, the separate ground wire, so I can use it to test polarity, ground loops, and stuff like that. But I'll get to that later. But I've tried all the other ones. I got some other ones that are still here. I mean, I've tried anti-static sprays, green things, contact enhancers. I've had them all over the years. Reclockers, different types of vibration control. I did a whole series on vibration control. Linear power supplies, supercapacitor power supplies, USB reclockers, the jitterbug things. I still have a few of these here. Anybody want them? Post a message. But today isn't really about things that I found that didn't work or no longer are applicable to my system, because there is a case where sometimes technology advances and makes things that were previous tweaks that were no longer necessary, and I'll get to that as well. But I wanted to focus today on kind of saving you guys the trouble I went through over the years of wasting time and money, although part of the fun of the hobby is trying things. And even though I have 30 years experience, I go to all the shows, you've seen some of the cool gear that I get to listen to, and that's just a fraction of what I've heard over the years. You still shouldn't just take my word for it. It's fun to try it yourself, and just because one person has a lot of experiences doesn't mean it's going to be the same for you. For example, Steve Gutenberg has a lot of experience, maybe probably even more than me in his resume, but pretty much everything that he likes, I don't like. I mean, I'm not a big Clips fan. I don't like most of the gear that he does. So while I respect his opinion and he's entitled to that, it's not going to influence me, except maybe what not to buy. So same thing should go for you. If you found some of my suggestions in the past helpful, that's great. Maybe you'll find some of these tips that I give you on tweaks helpful as well. But in the end, try it yourself if you can. The other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of tweaks is I don't really prep for these videos too much, but I did think about categorizing tweaks into different buckets. And what I came up with is a first bucket, which are ones that are tweaks that, no question, make an audible difference across a wide frequency range. Measurable, audible, A/B test, blind, no problem, those bucket ones. A second bucket would be ones that similar in terms of impact as the first, but are more geared for noise floor changes in your system. And then the third group is more of the niche type tweaks that may work for you, may not work for you. Again, based on what I was saying earlier, maybe if you've got some older gear, these tweaks could still be good for you. It's a try it, and also it could just be something to give comfort to your being neurotic audiophile like we all are. If it gives you some comfort or makes your life easier setting up things, I put those in a final bucket of tweaks. So without further ado, let's get started and let's talk about the first one that I think is the most important tweak. And I put room treatment as a tweak. It's not in the signal path. It's something that's ancillary. You don't usually buy it at the store at the same time as your gear. And you usually have totally different manufacturers than your traditional audiophile companies for room treatments. And you can do them yourself. That's another great thing about what I call, a niche type tweak like this. You can do these yourself. Very easy. You don't have to have engineering knowledge. But anyway, the reason I put those as a number one tweak is because nothing I've heard over the years makes a bigger difference than your room and the room treatments. I hear the gear at these shows time after time after time, and how much different it sounds, this exact same gear in different rooms, how it's based on setup and room treatments. So being able to, you know, put enough budget and utilize room treatments properly is critical to getting the value that you spent on the gear. It's just, there's no way around it. And so in terms of brands in that I like, other than making your own, ASC tube traps are one of my favorites. Those are the most powerful ones that I've found personally. The GIK, G-I-K, Real Trap's another one, well, a reputable one. And you've seen in my recent video, I put 2 new absorbers, thicker absorbers above me here, replaced them with the cheap ones that you can just buy that are real thin, curvy little pattern. You get what you pay for with room treatments for the most part. So don't cheap out on those. And I would advise you to invest in time watching some reputable YouTube videos on room treatments. I can't spend an hour like some of these guys do and have the wherewithal to give you all these diagrams and stuff for how to set up your room treatment. But I will give you this caution, because one thing I've found that some of these, I've listened to them, one thing that they forget to tell you that I've learned on my own is that a little square diagram going your dimensions only can go so far. You really have to listen and understand that sound looks at your room different than your eyes do. You can draw dimensions that show exactly what your room looks like, and it may be exact same dimensions, but you have to think, your eyes say you can't walk through that wall, but your sound can go through these walls. So what's on the other side of that wall? You know, in one case here, I've got bricks on the other side. In the other case, I have a hallway and a bathroom, much more hollow after you get past the drywall. So sound will react to one wall different than the other, even though dimensionally, I might be able to put them on a piece of paper to make it look symmetrical and perfect. So don't be married to the concept of aesthetically pleasing, exact symmetrical. There are some advantages to being somewhat symmetrical, but you have to think of it in terms of sound symmetrical. So if you've got brick wall on the other side, make sure that you've got treatments that treat symmetrically that side the same as this side. Hopefully that's helpful. That's one thing I don't see a lot of these seminars and long talks doing. But I think Audioholics and other guys do very good talks on room treatments, you know, and I've given you some tips with brands. So don't want to be bogged down, could talk about room treatments forever. The second tweak that I think piggybacks on room treatments is parametric EQ, especially with Roon or Dirac, however you want to pronounce it. That's another critical aspect. And I've seen so many rooms ruined by people thinking that just a few room treatments are fine, or a wavy curve. It's within 3 to 5 dB. That's good enough. I'm happy. You shouldn't be, okay? If you put a modulator on your voice, 3 to 5 dB in some of these ranges where you will sound differently to somebody. So singing will sound different from the actual recording. It's not high fidelity in a lot of respects that people would judge high fidelity if you've got all these little, even if they're little, nuances in the frequency response. So parametric EQ is the only way you can narrowly fine-tune ranges of correction to get things perfect. And when I say perfect, it doesn't necessarily mean totally flat, because as I think Harman did some studies and showed that humans really are more sensitive to high frequencies than low frequencies. So if you actually do it based on perfection for our ears, the curve is more slanted, with people preferring more bass to higher frequencies. So almost roughly maybe a dB per octave. But again, depending on how your ears are shaped, your head shadow effect, your room, a lot of those things may dictate doing a parametric EQ differently. Some people can even do a parametric EQ per song, because certain songs can even be improved with parametric EQ. So there's so much power in the tweakability of a parametric EQ, especially in the digital domain, which most of them are now. And it's so easy to turn it off if you don't like it and change it. Now, there are some things I will warn you, you need to worry about. You can make things worse obviously, with both room treatments and parametric EQ. I can move my ASE2 Trabs, which is very powerful, and make things worse. I can add too much gain to a certain frequency and induce digital clipping and a parametric EQ. So again, it's not that these are the most powerful tweaks, but only used properly would I put them in, guaranteed benefit. So again, invest the time to learn how to use these tweaks versus just saying you do them or have them. Okay, those are the two big bucket ones I put in that first bucket. The next bucket is ones that still are audible, measurable, blind testable, but are more about lowering your noise floor. I'm a big stickler for noise. I don't like to hear any noise from my speakers, hiss, hum. I don't like to hear any noise from my equipment, transformer hum. Let's talk about that first. I had a transformer hum at one time, but my amps, Steve McCormick, built in DC blocking protection in the actual amp, such that the toroids, which usually it's big toroids that'll hum due to some asymmetry on the line, DC. And with today's homes, all the stuff that's in your power line, it's inevitable that that could be a problem. So I don't like to hear anything humming from my equipment, especially if I can hear it at my listening position. So getting rid of that, tweaks that can get rid of that. Number one, like I said, there's these Humdinger things. Frank Van Alstyne makes a Humdinger that I'll put up here. That's one that will work. There's other ones that do DC blocking to different effects. I've just had good success with the Humdinger, and Steve looked at it, was very impressed with the design as well. That's what I would recommend, but there are others. And again, it's ABable. When the hum is gone, it's gone, and it's not there anymore. It's very easy to tell. And anecdotally, it probably enhances the performance of your transformer. I mean, your transformer shouldn't be humming if it's being fed optimally from the wall. So it could improve performance in other areas. But again, we're just talking about noise floor issue. Number one, that's a tweak that can help you right off the bat. Another tweak for noise floor is the hum that comes out of your speakers, ground loops. Okay, that's a very problematic area for almost all systems now, because we've got so much gear. We're in home theaters and you're plugging in projectors and one outlet here, cable boxes, everything, subwoofers on the other side of the room. So you have lots of different ground potentials and ground loops that come up because things are plugged into all different outlets. So that's where I'll give the tweak of a power conditioner some props, not so much for the conditioning aspect, because I don't think most well-designed gear needs a power conditioner. But I don't agree with the having your protection there. I'll save a tweak for later at the end to show you what I think for protection. But I do like the idea of one box, a distributor type box, being used for all as many pieces of your equipment, non-amplifiers at least, that you can. So you get them all plugged into the same outlet. A 20 amp distributor box with 9 or so outlets should be enough. Hopefully that will solve many ground loops. But again, your amps probably should still be into the wall, and you may still have projectors way across the room or subwoofers. You can't get them all in the room and you still have a ground loop. So how do you get rid of that? Well, the most common thing I've seen in almost all systems, it usually originates if you've got a cable box hooked up to your system. Somehow that will infiltrate and cause a problem because of that coax cable line, notorious for it. So there are little filters, and I'll put one up here that you can put in the coax line. That's another tweak that works really well to get rid of ground loops. You can also switch. Nowadays, bandwidth is so good. Now cable companies are going to Wi-Fi boxes where it's not wired from the wall, and it's basically just a streaming type cable box now. So you've got no wired connection, and that's what I'm using now here, which good effect, and don't have that wired connection and ground issue. Or there'll be I don't have one handy, but there's a device that'll look like this. This is just an XLR switch box, but it'll look similar to this with an XLR in, XLR out, and a transformer inside. So if like I had with my Rel 25, a hum just with that piece of equipment, nothing from my other speakers. Well, putting that transformer in line with the cable from the crossover to the sub, that will get rid of the hum. You don't want to be doing it on devices that already have transformers on the input, but you probably won't have a hum as a result of those anyway, so you don't need it. But look for those. They're like 20, 30 bucks on Amazon. Now, there are some super high-end ones that Steve McCormick makes, Steve Nugent makes from Empirical Audio, that do other things, put a transformer, convert RCA to XLR, and there's some benefit there, and it's a good reason to piggyback to my next, quote, noise floor type suggestion is, I don't want to get into the cable debate just yet, I'll do that in another video, but switching to XLRs often helps reduce ground loops. And in my case, I saw it with the REL 25 firsthand, easy A/B testable. RCA from the crossover to the REL, hum. XLR from the crossover to the sub, excuse me, less hum. Not totally gone, but at least showed that switching to an XLR cable was a benefit. So it could also be due to how the inputs are designed on either side, so it could not necessarily be the cable. But there's so many reasons why I like XLR better. Number one, the connections at the end are superior. They can lock in, and they're just hardier. They work over a long distance better. Sometimes, one thing that even the most adamant objectivists will probably admit with cables making a difference, if you have a long run of high capacitance RCA cable, between a passive preamp and a low input impedance amp, something that I actually had in the past and heard firsthand, that's where you have a bad cable for that mix of gear. That's where it's good to switch. But again, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I just want to give a tip to Star Quad XLR cables. I find are helpful for lowering the noise floor as just a tweak. Forget about the sound quality from your speakers. Lowering your noise floor, this is a potential tweak that could be advantageous. And as I mentioned with that power cord, helping to diagnose other ground loop issues, which piece of equipment, when you have a cord like this, not for the gimmicky stuff on it, but when you have the ground lifted and you can even change polarity, this can be helpful to diagnose which piece of gear is causing the ground loop. So this kind of quote tweak is helpful. And what you're going to find with some of these tweaks I'm showing you are devices that are not so much in your system, but you use them to determine if you have a problem or not. Because what a lot of these tweaks rely on is telling you there's a problem, which really may not even exist. They may just be trying to trigger your neurotic nature to think it exists, RF, this, that, and the other. But it may not actually be a problem in your system. Noise on the power line. Let's talk about that. Power conditioners and all that, they tell you, oh, you got to clean up the power, this, that, and the other. Well, why don't you spend some money on some tweaks to even find out if you have a problem first, or RF or EMI. One device that's really good, a polarity check on your outlets. Make sure your outlets are grounded and wired properly. Feeding it the right power, go ahead and get a tweak that sees if that's a problem to begin with. Doesn't, what good is it going to be to plug a power conditioner into this if it's wrong? There's also these meters that will measure, this one measures electromagnetic radiation on the power line. And there's even some countries that regulate how much can be on the power line. So I think it's Kazakhstan, that's one of them. So having a meter like this that actually gives you a readout of what is on the power line can be helpful. Again, it may not translate to something that is audible from your speakers, but we're now in that third bucket where these are tweaks that will help give you comfort and maybe result in sound improvements, or at least just give you some comfort that you don't have a problem that needs to be addressed with a aftermarket product. So this one, you plug it in and it'll give you an actual reading. I've tried those Audio Prism noise sniffer things, but that actually has a amplifier and a little speaker to give you the noise, simulated noise that's on your line. That's kind of BS. I mean, what good is it to put it through an amplifier, a cheap amplifier and a cheap speaker in a device? Just give me the readout of what you're measuring on the line. And so this is this is Stetzerizer microsurge meter, and this is not an audiophile marketed type company. So to me, sometimes that's even a benefit, because sometimes the ones that only market to audiophiles are doing it for a reason, they know they can, trigger some neurotic people to buy for whatever reason. But anyway, this one you can put on your line and it'll give the readout, and then they sell these filters that I have tested it. It does work. It does reduce the EMI that it measures here. And I've even done it with a Shunyata Hydra. The Shunyata Hydra is supposed to be noise filtering, but when I plugged this in, it was off the charts in terms of noise, the EMI. And then I plugged one of these into the Hydra and it reduced by half. So again, sometimes the products you get may not be doing that much or very little or nothing, So investing in tweaks that measure and identify whether you have a problem is one of the key takeaways I hope you're getting today. It's not just about XYZ products. Another one in that third bucket, and I spent a whole big series on vibration control. And if you recall watching that, one of my best homegrown solutions for vibration control was double yellow squash balls inside one of these vibropods. And the reason why I count these as a positive tweak, and I think will work for most people on mechanical devices like turntables and speakers especially, is that I was able to measure a difference, and then there was a clear difference in my feet just hitting the floor. Number one, that was an aggravation that was gone with the subwoofer not delivering as much energy into the second floor here, suspended flooring. That was an immediate benefit outside of what's coming from the speakers. And then also my speakers in here had a lot of resonance problems. I had to remove the grill. If I played it too loud, it really wasn't a pleasant sounding speaker at all. But at low volumes, it was great. If I could just get rid of the resonance, I could actually get dynamics up and play louder. And these things, as well as removing the grills and other tweaks on the resonance of your speakers, can materially sound measurably too. I had frequencies that would indicate problems when that resonance would kick in of the speaker. But when I use these things, and on my main speakers, I use Townsend seismic bars. So that's a third-party product, similar to what my homegrown product that I think definitely is a tweak that could work for you if you have resonances and issues on subwoofers, speakers, turntables especially. Then you can trickle it down to your other gear and see how it works for you. Okay, other kind of RF and EMI, people constantly saying, oh, your server's doing this, your SNPS is doing that, and polluting your lines. Well, we got one thing to test what's on the lines. RF meter, inexpensive. EMI meter, relatively inexpensive. And what's funny is to find out if you really have a problem that you need to address. In most cases, you don't. I've used this on a lot of different pieces of equipment here. I've got almost no problems, no RF in my server at all, no issues with this thing going off. What I find it mostly goes off in anything that's more than green is the IEC inlet for major power devices, or tube amps. I've done this at different people's houses, dealerships. And from what I can tell, radiated EMI and RF when using these products. Now, obviously, if you're going to be doing this for certification purposes and high-end measurements and stuff, you would use more sophisticated measurement tools. But for just getting an idea of if you have a problem, to satisfy your neurosis for worrying about these things that people talk about, oh, you got to have this product to get rid of it. No, you don't, if you don't have the problem. So see if you have a problem first. One other thing that'll help you, tools that I call tweaks, just little protractor type tools that'll help you set angles for your speaker placement. Because like I was saying with room treatments, speaker placement is right in line with that. Getting your speakers placed properly for the way the drivers and the speaker is designed. It could be on axis is the best way. In some speakers, it may be off axis. Being able to try and benchmark and measure different angling and toe in is very important. And I can move mine just 1 inch in or 1 inch out, and it changes the center balance and imaging because I listen such near field. So having tools that help you with speaker setup are very critical. That's pretty much the main ones I wanted to go over here. Oh, I will go over another one. This one I don't use anymore, but USB reclockers was a big deal back in the day. And I was back in computer audio way back in like 2007, 2008, well before it became even mainstream. And back then, DACs really didn't have USB inputs, or if they did, they were just converting it to spit up behind the scenes. It was synchronous, not asynchronous. It didn't have galvanic isolation. All the advances that have been made with USB interfaces weren't in existence early on. So devices like USB reclockers, the Uptone Regen, the i5, I got all these things, tried them all. This was the one I found was the best, the Intona for the money. It didn't require another power supply that you had to plug in something for, and it had both reclocking and galvanic isolation. So overall value, if you still have old gear, old USB server, an old Mac or PC based server, laptop with some poor USB ports, or a DAC that's old, doesn't really have good USB async interface, this might be still an option, although I would just recommend you buy new gear at this point. But again, a tweak that could work, did work in the past, not much now. And then the final tweak that I wanted to show you is one for peace of mind. And it has to do, well, let me just take the camera off of there and I will show you what we're talking about here. Let me stroll downstairs and I will show you one of my favorite tweaks in that third bucket. Basically, it just gives me peace of mind. Again, I like to keep stair walking in my videos because it shows me doing cardio. My car is blocking here. I can't even use my garage because of this speaker build project that has been going on for almost a year now. Let's see. Okay, so right back here is what I'm talking about. It's a whole house surge protection device with building quality MOVs, not those dinky little ones that are in surge protectors that really don't protect anything. I've never heard of one of them saving any piece of equipment from a true lightning strike. And that's been my biggest fear at night is, getting hit by a lightning strike. All this great gear I have, as well as, appliances, TVs, everything getting wiped out. So investing in a whole house protection with building quality protection is something I think is worth it. And you don't have to go for the audiophile name Richard Gray one. I was just able to get a good deal on this one, but your electrician should be able to implement ones with the really high quality MOVs that will give you that peace of mind at night that, at least in theory, you've got much better protection than those dinky power strips. My friend Pepe had his whole house hit by lightning. Everything was blown up, and he had audiophile power, conditioner device, didn't do a thing to save him. So this is something that I think is a tweak that is a must-have if you've got any sizable budget in your audio system. All right, guys, hopefully you found this video helpful. I'll have more on this speaker project, hopefully, when the drivers come in, probably 2025. But anyway, stay tuned, and I will see you guys soon.